are objective, right? Like we have these African pastors over there that stand on people's chests, that make people eat grass or drink gasoline, or they, make them handle snakes and all these other stuff. So that's objectively harmful, right? So it wouldn't be hard at all for a system of checks and balances to look at that and say, okay, this is not right. Like we're going to do away with this. So that's already legal. Like anything that is objectively illegal is already done. Like Jim Jones didn't get away with making people drink Kool-Aid, like just because it's religion or whatever. But the problem lies is that there are some things that don't necessarily have legal repercussions, but they most certainly have individual repercussions for that person, whether they be psychological or financial or whatever, like in this case. So, I mean, there has to be something has to be said for these things that are kind of nuanced and kind of on the line, and they're iffy, maybe they're psychologically damaging, but that's really subjective, whether you're religious or not. And so we really need some sort of an oversight team that is willing to overlook the whole fanaticism behind it, and the whole and regardless of the person's convictions, if the practice is harmful to the individual, then there needs to be somebody there to say, you can't do this.
I agree with you completely on that there needs to be some sort of oversight. But at the same time, a lot of those abuses that, a lot of these places do are actually covered by ecclesiastical practice or guidance.
That's what I'm saying, though, is like if your religion has a doctrine or a dogma or any sort of commandment or delegation to do this harm to somebody, or any sort of justification to do this harm, then I believe that at that point they need to be given one of two choices. They need to either amend their scripture, amend their doctrine, or they need to completely abandon it. Because I mean, and that's what it's going to come down to. Because I mean, if you look at all these different sects of Christianity and the different belief systems, we can already see the moderation in Christianity amongst some sects. Like, for instance, most of these small community non-denominational churches, some Nazarene churches, and even some small town, Baptist, Methodist, and just small town Protestant churches. But like somebody said earlier, I think it was Brass talking about these large organizations such as, the Vatican and the Catholic Church and all these other larger organizations. We really need to track these this evolution of these religions, so that way we can look out for these warning signs of, hey, these people are starting to get into this, fanatic territory. They're starting to get into this territory where they're causing some possible psychological harm here. And I believe that maybe some sort of a grading system, like maybe a Better Business Bureau for churches or something like that, should be put into place, should be implemented, if not for anything, just to give the general public an idea of what they're getting into when they join up with the religion.
Well, that was my idea for some kind of ecclesiastical oversight, and I don't mean like an imam thing. I don't mean ecclesiastical as in, we want to make sure that this is in accordance with scripture. No.
That's what I thought you were saying.
Not the same thing, right? Don't conflate those two. They're vastly different things of what we're talking about here. But I do think
Steve, don't say conflate. Ugh.
Why?
No, I'm just fucking.
Another thing is, like, if I also may bring up something, is like, I think that we also have to recognize that a good number of the population are just fucking idiots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they need to be protected from themselves, though, right, Brass? I mean, I'm sorry. We have things out there where we say, yeah, this is abuse, right? If you say my religion is for this child to go down and eat grass off the ground or something, whatever the hell it is, that's abuse. And I've seen it happen in churches where they've done certain things. Like I watched this one video where their kids were on a line and the priest or whatever it was like shaking the kid and then slapped in the back of the head and they walked away. And I'm not talking like a little tap. We're talking, where they felt it and moved. We call that abuse. And if it's under the guise of religion, it doesn't make it any less abuse. I'm sorry. Why are we conditioned to think that the freedom of religion allows for something like that? It doesn't. And why are we not seeing people stand up in church saying that's wrong? We watch all these videos of people going out and pointing out things that are wrong. We see people standing up for doing what's right numerous times on YouTube. But what I don't see is videos of people in church standing up and saying to the pastor, the person in charge, what you're doing is wrong. What you just did by hitting that kid's abuse. I saw one video where the baby was being literally attacked by the clergy guy, the priest or whatever it was. I mean, just like, smacked around because, like, I think they think that they're born evil and born with sin, or they're demonically possessed. And they kind of took the baby out away from the guy, right? I don't know if you saw that video.
But the only problem with that is that these people in these churches, I mean, if somebody doesn't agree with the way that a church is doing it, they're going to go to a different church. So you're not going to.
It's abuse. Jim, this is outright abuse. If this was not a church and somebody has smacked a kid, somebody would be going, "Hey, dude, I'm going to knock you on your ass." But because it's a church, we don't see anybody ever stand up and say that's wrong.
But it's because all these people are so encumbered with their religion, not just the religion, but with their individual church, that they cannot see outside.
Not one person but Jim, I'm asking you. Not one person has the ethical consideration to do what is right in a church that's supposed to be about ethical concerns and being morally upright.
No,
not one person says what you just did was wrong.
Framework. But their idea of their own ethical framework, their own self-ontology, is developed by the very church that they would be.
But not everybody in that church believes that way.
I think it goes deeper than that.
I think there's a group thing, but not everybody thinks the exact same thing. Yes, Caleb. And by the way, welcome, Raul. I'm not sure if I know who you are. I usually check everybody. I forgot to check you. My bad. I do. I'll check normally. But yeah, you seem cool. You're legit, right?
I was just going to say I have a story about that, because I recently had to go to my grandmother's funeral when she was a pretty devout Catholic. But in the middle of it, the priest there, he started talking to, because I have a lot of young cousins who no more than 10, and a lot of them was sitting in like the middle of the church, and then at one point during the service, the priest goes up and starts talking to them specifically, and to everyone else there, because not everyone in the family was as religious as my grandmother, obviously, like me. But he talked directly to these young kids and told them that they should be coming to church to make their grandma, who is dead, happy. And that just really, like, it was that really rubbed me the wrong way. And I can't stand up to like say anything about it, because this is where my grandmother loved to be. She was a huge part of the church her entire life.
Maybe that's something we need to start advocating. Maybe we should start telling people, look, if you see things that are wrong in church, say something. And I even go one step further. If you're in a church and the pastor is saying something that's not just scripturally different from what you believe, right? I'm not saying like he's saying the scripture is this and you think it's something else. But if the church is advocating a position that is actually wrong, and saying, yes, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a velociraptor or something, right? Which, for some reason, seems to be the narrative for young creationists or something. But they say something that is scientifically false. Stand up and say something. Say, excuse me, Pastor, that's not correct. You're preaching something that is demonstrably. We should start a movement where people in the churches. Because it's freedom of speech, right? And the most they can do is be asked to leave, right?
Here's the reason why people are standing up and calling out, hey, that's bullshit, is because one, they don't want to upset the herd, and two, if they do, they will be ostracized and kicked out of their community. And for a lot of those people, that's all that they have.
I social pressures, I get that.
Well, I mean, look at what's going on with the Catholic Church. How many Catholics are willing to stand up and say, I'm leaving the church, what my church is doing is wrong. I mean, these are much less in your face and much less egregious than basically, a pedophile pipeline, and yet you can't even get people to stand up for that. So and then we kind of go back full circle, to the big organizations versus these small organizations, because you have like in the 90s when the Native American church, when the government found out that they were using sacramental peyote for their religious rituals, they just went in there and just completely ended it. But what they didn't divulge was that this Native American church was the most successful trial of
getting people off of addiction, getting people off of drugs, and helping people lead more productive lives. And I mean, so this is something that, while socially it's not acceptable, it does have its applications.
Sure.
And so,
I agree. I believe that.
Right.
I have no issue with any of that stuff, Jim. None whatsoever.
But, okay, so that's what I'm saying, though, is that the government interfered with this because they said that it's illegal, that peyote is harmful, yet at the same time there's verifiable evidence that what they were doing was of great benefit to the community.
Well, that seems more. That seems
so
like more of an argument to end the war on drugs than it does.
I agree.
No, government intervention in religion.
That's a bad side effect of this.
But the argument that I'm trying to make, though, is that this is just further credence to the fact that if we allow the government in any way to regulate this thing, it would obviously have to be something third party that operates outside of the government, like some sort of a watchdog agency. But I mean, if we allow the government to make these decisions and to set the parameters and everything like that, we really lose the potential to see something that can be potentially helpful for the entire population.
I disagree entirely.
That's why I think it's essential to have these third-party watchdogs, so to speak, organizations, because they will not only, they're not just attack dogs. They won't just jump on and latch their teeth in. I want an organization who will take the time to, first of all, understand the church's framework, understand the beliefs framework, understand how they operate psychologically and ontologically before you start analyzing them or assessing them in any way. And then you can get into the deeper things and say, okay, according to their dogmatic practices, according to their church traditions, their rituals, whatever it may be, is this harmful to the individual? And not just is it harmful to the individual, but does it have the potential to cause harm to the individual?
I don't think that the government can't do that. I think the government can do a perfectly fine job of that. Just because we don't have the people in power right now that we need to, that agree with us, doesn't mean that the government is incapable of doing this. I mean, the government has been regulating things that are covered by different amendments for years. We, like you said earlier, we still regulate guns, even though we have a Second Amendment. There's still things you can't say, even though we have a First Amendment. I mean, just because you have an amendment doesn't mean, you can't regulate it.
But the fact of the matter is that you're talking about the same government that condemned people like Jim Jones and all these other people who are hurting people in the name of religion. But at the same time, they're allowing Jehovah's Witnesses to faith heal their children and allow them to reject blood transfusions and ultimately have them die. And then when they go to court for it,
which is why we need standardized regulations.
They're cracking down a little bit on that.
Right. But what I'm saying,
after they have this many deaths, people are now
right. But what I'm saying is like this has gone on for how long, and it's taken this long for the government to step in.
I agree.
I don't think that.
But you can make that argument for anything.
Yeah, the wheels of government are slow.
They fucked up a bunch in the past, so therefore just nuke the system.
Yeah, the wheels turn slowly when it comes to the wheels of change in government. We all understand that, but they are changing. People are being prosecuted for neglect. Parents are being prosecuted for not feeding their child properly and things of that nature, and not allowing medical care.
But it's not done until after the fact.
Well, I mean, again, these are flaws in the system that need to be fixed. I mean, there was a
right. It's because there's no oversight because nobody's looking into this.
There is oversight. It's just the oversight needs to be better, right? I mean, there's these social services.
It's not just oversight, but they need to implement these checks and balances and say, if you want to be a Jehovah's Witness, fine. If you want to ride your bicycle everywhere and knock on people's doors, fine. But do not refuse medical treatment for your child.
Well, again, these things are changing, right? I mean, the social services are finding out that these cult mentalities, not so much religion. I don't want to say JW is a cult, but the cult mentality that they have. I think it waters down the word cult, though. But whatever. People here say Mormon is a cult, and I was a Mormon, and I find nothing cultish about them, to be honest with you. And that's just not a bias, as I know the people. It did. I've been to other churches where they do have a cult-like mentality. My brother was a cult-like mentality when he was a Jehovah's Witness.
Right. Well, I just want to clarify that I am okay with free exercise of religion, and I'm okay with people analyzing that free exercise. But it's just again, I feel like a broken record, but I just like it's really important to clarify the absolute need in any situation when it comes to religious oversight, that we have clearly defined paradigmatic limits to the way that these people can exercise their religion.
But at the same time, with how massive a lot of these, let me rephrase that, given the overall scope and size of religion in this country, how many tens of thousands of churches, from your mega churches that are the size of a football arena, a stadium, or just a little something on the corner that can fit 10, 15 people in it. It was just too big to be able to monitor everything efficiently.
So I mean, what would you suggest in that case? I mean, because think about it. If we'd been doing this for 50 years already, we would have already had a very comprehensive database of all these religions, and it'd be a lot easier to update and upkeep. But I mean, yeah, well, I mean, if and when we implement something like that, it's going to be a fucking train wreck, because yeah, you're right, and like I said, there are so many sects just within Christianity alone that they all have their own different beliefs. Well, and usually it's not the fundamental beliefs that are the harmful ones. It is the ones that are loosely interpreted, the ones that are just by happenstance, And
well, can you give an example of what you mean by something that happens by Baptist states?
Okay, so like for example, like some an African preacher telling their congregation that they had to test their faith by drinking gasoline.
Okay, all right. So something like that is obviously very harmful in just every which way. I agree with you. Yeah, that kind of shit needs to be shut down. But at the same time,
it's not doctrinal at all. So that's why it's important for whoever to do it to understand that framework, because you can't just look at the doctrine and say this is what they believe. I mean, we all know that to be true because we have one Bible and tens of thousands of religions from that one Bible. So I mean, it's easy to completely debunk that immediately, but it lends more credence to the fact that we need not only oversight, but we need somebody to closely monitor the development and evolution of these religions and set some parameters for when we need to run interference and say, hey, you're heading in the wrong direction. You need to stop.
I don't think we need to understand a religion or that isn't part of their beliefs to say you're not allowed to feed people gasoline. Like, I really don't understand. I don't really understand the idea that you have to know the religion and tell people this isn't part of your doctrine to say, I'm sorry, even if you believe that, you can't do it.
Well, I mean, but people aren't telling that to, Jehovah's Witnesses about their kids refusing blood transfusions.
That's why we need to start doing that. Okay. That doesn't mean we need to start educating them about their religion, because people are going to believe all kinds of stupid shit. People believe the earth is flat. It doesn't matter what you show them is in their holy book. They're going to believe what is comfortable for them to believe. But you can set legal limits saying, no, you can't refuse your kid blood transfusions, and that does not require you understanding their religion. That just requires you setting boundaries of what can and can't be done.
Right, but at the same time, I'm not talking about addressing the individual. I'm talking about addressing the board, addressing the implementers of these religions. The big bosses, so to speak. Like, for example, in the Pentecostal Church, the UPC board, the United Pentecostal Board. That's what I would. That is who I would appeal to. I would appeal to them and say, hey, because they're the ones who decide on everything from curriculum to church retreats to interpretations.
let me just point out that polygamy is still in the Mormon book as some, no. It's still in the hold on. It's still in the Mormon book as something that is a moral good. However, also in their book it says you must follow the laws of man. Okay, so the only reason they don't practice polygamy is because it's against the law. We don't need to understand.
That's fair. That's true.
Right. So we don't need to understand Mormonism and go in and say you can't do this because we understand Mormonism. All you have to do is say, sorry, you can't do it. It's against the law.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that you actually hang on. I like the fact that you framed it that way because a lot of people say like Mormons practice polygamy. Like, no, they don't, and it bugs the crap out of me because I like to be factual. But what you said is true. So if people explain it that kind of way,
you're telling me you don't have multiple wives, Steve?
No, I just like facts. And I don't like any church having misinformation about them. Even the Catholic Church, I don't like that, right? So it doesn't matter what I belong to. I would have the same visceral reaction when people are saying, "Well, the Catholic Church believes this." I'm like, "Well, no, they don't. They have a lot of other shit that they do, but don't make it into something that they don't. Because if you promote false information, then people question the legit information you put out, right?
Right.
You don't need a lie to promote an agenda if your agenda is truth, right? So it's basically counterproductive in my opinion. But anyways, so, anybody want to call in real quick? We do have numbers in the video description. I'm trying to still test it out. There was somebody from Twitter that said I was censoring them before, and I told the person, look, I'm not going to censor you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open a Hangout right now, and you're more than welcome to join. Why don't you come in and take me on since you think that I'm censoring you? And he just did it again. I was like, do you not understand? I am live right now. Here's the number you can call. How the hell am I fucking censoring you if I have a platform right here and told you, call in, I will take your argument. How is that censorship? Do you use this word in a way that's completely an antithesis to where everybody else would use this word, censor? I don't see how promoting you to call and talk to you is censorship.
Well, I want to quote Inigo Montoya.
What the fuck is wrong with people, man?
It's a complete
the Dunning-Kruger effect to start.
Stop oppressing me.
Ridiculous.
So to get back on track, I kind of wanted to address what you were saying, about these, people breaking laws and just say, you can't do this. And that works great for these objective instances. But what about the subjective instances, like for instance, where they are basically extorting people for money to make these payments that they can't afford? People are putting themselves in debt. I mean, there is no law against that. I mean, there's no law against
actually, and that's
actually there kind of is
ecclesiastical practice, and that's part of the reason why they're going after the Church of Scientology right now, because you have people going hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, if not millions, just to move up their quote unquote bridge to total freedom.
And actually, if you can prove that these donations are coming under duress, and that includes psychological manipulation because they're being told these bad things will happen to them if they don't or whatever, you can actually bring a legal case against them. So again, you don't necessarily have to understand the religion. You can actually use the laws in place.
Yeah, matter of fact, we do have laws against elderly abuse, right? Should we have laws against like religious abuse?
Well, here's the loophole to what you're just saying, Ansgar, is that, and I just fucking hate Scientology to my core more than anything else. But they actually make their members sign a contract stating that a Scientologist cannot sue another Scientologist, to include the church. And so even though they've left, they've already signed a contract saying that they cannot sue the church.
So the only problem with tithing, though, is that tithing is looked at as a free will offering, right? So nobody is I mean, even if they are coerced into it, I mean, very, very rarely does anybody win any of these cases, and it just ends up turning into a money pit for people that already can't afford these things. So I mean, wouldn't it be better to take these religions and group them into different categories amongst the different sects and say, okay, these closely identify with each other, these closely identify with each other, then set those churches under a general umbrella and force the pastors or the church leaders, whoever's starting these churches, to register within that umbrella and have some sort of a third party committee, watchdog committee within that umbrella of each subcategory, so that way they can familiarize themselves with that and they can say, okay, these are the parameters for this umbrella. You can operate, you can freely express yourself religiously within these parameters, within this umbrella, but and by registering with this, you agree to do it. But then again,
that actually seems a lot more difficult than simply what did we do when we wanted to crack down on, let's say, child abuse crimes, because they were going under investigated or whatever. In some places they still do. We create a special victims unit. We create a special task force. So if we're seeing in the area a place where there's financial abuse going on by the church or something like that, why not instead advocate to our lawmakers to put together some kind of a task force, and a special investigations unit that looks into these churches for the abuses that they're causing. I mean, that's what they do to try and get to the Catholic Church.
That's the problem, though, is that these special victim units are mostly done after the fact, after it's already done. So the damage has already been done. Whereas if you have a third party group that is actually monitoring these churches and actually facilitating people to report, I don't want to say malpractice, but to report immoral activity or unlawful activity or psychological harm or any kind of harm within the church that violates
after the
general nuisance.
Right. Of course it does. But what I'm saying is that parameters have to be set. There has to be a line drawn somewhere. I understand that. Okay, so anybody who is who is encumbered with religion is undoubtedly doing themselves harm, right? And they're being done harm by the church by being indoctrinated and blah blah blah. So I'm not arguing that religion does not cause harm from the get-go, but what I am saying is that it gets progressively, or it can get progressively worse incrementally. So somewhere amongst those step ups into gradually getting more and more severe, somewhere there has to be a line drawn saying, okay, you cannot cross this, because once you cross this line, that is that's when the scale starts tipping into serious irreversible harm. So whatever that boundary is needs to be established, whether it's by psychoanalysts or whatever. They need to determine where that line is for each individual religious organizations, religious subcategories, however you want to do it. And what's important is that we need to be proactive. Okay, we can't just come in after the fact and try to fix things. We need to monitor things and have some kind of preventative method in place.
All right, hang on, Chef Jim. Let's hold for a second. I want to get a couple other people in here that have been trying to get in, and we all know that Jim loves his microphone. They're like one with each other. Goddess Ozzy, you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes. So first of all, I think it's the first time I've actually vocally spoken with you, correct?
G'day. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Awesome. So we Ozzy and Goddess Ozzy and I have had our disagreement. We hugged and kissed it out, not figuratively speaking. But it's all good, right? We good?
Yeah, it's all good, man. It's just it just happened after 5 days straight of epistemology and philosophy, and that's all my Twitter war was.
No worries, man. So what do you got to add to the discussion, buddy?
Well, I do agree with both sides of the argument, both with Jim and with Ansgar. Sorry, I think I said it wrong. Ansgar.
Yeah, that's good enough. Ansgar, yeah. That's cool.
Ansgar. Okay, I do agree to the most part, but also I think that all religion as it stands right now should go through public scrutiny in the form of government, to a degree, through licensing, through understanding, through waivers and things like that. So both the preachers and those that are organizing the religion and the participants of said religion know what they're getting into, much like the game ESRB board does for games.
Anything else want to add on that?
Well,
you told me to shut up.
I'm kind of wondering right here.
If I may bring up something, it's like
I always get sort of worried when people like they ask for more government influence over something because like it's always good to think like, oh, we can have this oversight, but we'd also have to realize that there is a possibility that it can be corrupted.
But any oversight can be corrupted, right? I mean, there's no perfect system. That doesn't
I get
exclude
that.
us working with something. Yes. I say hand up. Oh my goodness. Look at this hand from the illustrious sock account who's not using a camera, so you won't be able to see him, but sock account. Did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah. Oh geez, there's just been so much, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can.
Oh, good luck with that.
I know. So the first thing is that the idea that you could have some type of committee going around, like the example he gave is like the ESRB for video games. Like you're gonna go and rate a church as like 13 or mature or teen or whatever. Like I'm not even sure how those ratings would even work on something like that. But yeah, I agree with the sentiment that like more government regulation isn't required. What needs to happen is the government regulations that are already in place need to be enforced. And exemptions for religious freedom should not be granted in cases that are clear violation of constitutional rights or the law. I mean, it really comes down to something that simple. If you have a church that encourages something like inequality among sexes, like that is a doctrinal thing within their church, and you can see that it's enforced in that way, that's a violation of people's rights. And people shouldn't submit themselves to that. And a church that is practicing such habits should be held accountable for those things. Things like discrimination and hiding behind religious freedom as an excuse to commit acts of discrimination because it's your religious beliefs that people are less of a whatever based on gender or something like that is not an excuse. And so, and also when it comes to things like child abuse. Now, you don't need to be proactive with the child abuse. You don't need, if somebody has a kid, we don't proactively go into their homes to make sure that their homes are suitable for having children there. But when things are reported, again, hiding behind the guise of religious freedom is not an excuse for a violation of the law. In those cases, there has to be this clear line of demarcation, and we already have it. It's the law, and that's what it is. And so, right. The problem isn't that churches are. That we need to go and we need to, rate churches or assess churches. What we need to do is make sure that, religious freedom is a great thing to have, and the fact that, nobody has to be pressured into a religion or, not following a religion or anything. But the idea that religious freedom would somehow exempt you from following things that are already laid out, by the law or by the Constitution or anything like that is what needs to be stopped. Now,
but the only problem with that is that by using the things that are already in place in our legislature to regulate this, is that you are still bypassing what could possibly be the worst amount of harm, is the psychological harm that is not constitutionally protected. I mean, yes, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, sure. But it is not specifically outlined in legislature that actually holds any of these people accountable for the psychological harm that they deal. So somewhere, you're accounting for all of the objective harm, absolutely, especially the legislatively objective harm. That's perfectly fine. But what about the subjective harm, the psychological harm, the long lasting implications that religion causes?
There are actually laws for that.
Yeah, first off, you'd have to present it like an example, what you're talking about. If you're just talking about somebody living with the fear of hell for their entire life, I would hardly rate that as a form of psychological abuse. I mean,
and I would disagree with you. I believe that indoctrination is psychological abuse.
I do have to agree with Jim here. The belief of hell over a period of lifelong is actually a form of emotional and mental abuse. But more so, I need to bring my point back. When I mentioned the ESRB, I meant more of the fact of public scrutiny rather than a rating system. More so having to overview the holy texts and just give it a basic understanding so that people can see what is morally right and what is justifiably right and what is lawfully right, if you know what I mean.
Well, no, there should be nothing that is exempt that's already in place by the law. Like that's why I say that this is a meaningless endeavor. We already have clearly described laws that do protect against these things, and they need to be enforced. That's the point that I was making, is that you don't need to go through and assess these churches now and say, okay, are they, some of the things that they're doing morally acceptable? So we're going to, like waive them having to follow certain laws. We don't do that. So
that was my argument, though. That was my argument, though. Why are we not implementing the laws that we already have? If somebody's on a diocese and they smack a kid around, why is that person being arrested?
I have no idea. Exactly. That's the point, and I agree with you on this point. Is that is child abuse? If you were to see exactly the same thing happen in a Walmart parking lot, you would call the police. You would report that.
That was my argument, right?
Okay. And people need to stand up for this and report this. And when things are reported, they need to be handled. They need to be handled outside of the institution themselves. These reports have to be taken seriously because these behaviors have to be discouraged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like these whole Catholic internal investigations are completely bullshit, and that needs to be done away with immediately.
Yeah. But to the problem with for something they talking about like psychological abuse. Okay, I agree that if you are deliberately lying to somebody, and in the way that I believe Scientologists are, because I don't think that any Scientologist in the upper echelon of their organization actually believes the shit that they put out there. Okay, and in which case that is an organization that is set up that by a guy that who said that if you want to make money, start a religion. Like this is clearly a fraudulent organization. In that case, yes, like you can point to if you're deliberately misleading people with threats, essentially, like whether it's that they're not going clear or whatever. I don't even know all the terminology for Scientology there. In that case, that's against the law. You can't do that. But when you try to compare this to something like Christianity, where the belief in the afterlife, heaven and hell, is that's something that I could definitely point to as might have adverse effects on people, but that's providing the case that these people are trying to mislead these people. These people generally believe this is true, and this is the majority of the population here as well. So if we're going to try to create some type of standard by which we're going to measure these things up to, or is going to every single religious organization out there and saying, listen, that you can't talk about anything that happens post-mortem anymore. That it's now against the law to talk about the afterlife. Like no one's going to support that. And what government do you think is going? If the government's going to raise up some type of standard for this, and they tell people that they can't actually start, they can't talk about these type of concepts, and everybody has to be, adopt some type of universalist position. That's a clear infringement on people's religious freedoms to believe what they want.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm advocating that.
No, there's a clear and obvious difference between setting a standard and enforcing the rules. Just to go ahead and bring back on a previous point, you said that there should be more fervent activity in regards to enhancing the laws, increasing the laws, making them more efficient. That could only
I never said that. Just
no, not you. I think it was Jim. Not you. Okay. I think it was Jim. Oh. But I think I agree to a complete point, whereas we can only be so good as reality will allow us to be, because we cannot be a minority of report. There's just no logical way that we can be a minority report kind of society.
So I think it's fair to say that, and if anybody disagrees with me, please let me know. But I think we can all agree that we can address these objective issues with the church, and even some of the psychological ones and the ones that aren't really covered by the Constitution. And I still believe that there are some that are not, but I digress to this other point, that even if we can implement this system where we are both proactively and reactively regulating these churches to ensure that they do not do any objective harm, at the same time we have to keep in mind that they still maintain the doctrine that gives them justification to do that harm. So do we allow that doctrine to also stay around to possibly, because I mean, think about it, that doctrine can possibly and has in the past been used as justification for some of the most abhorrent crimes in the world.
You can't have a church change their doctrine, but you can shine a light on it, saying because of this doctrine, you're not allowed to do certain things.
But at the same time, how would that fit in with our current framework of the First Amendment?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though, is that can you regulate doctrine? Can you make it to where they have to?
Let me ask you, Jim.
Doctrine for approval?
Hang on, let me ask Jim a question. Should we outlaw like the snake handling thing, right? You're well familiar with that, obviously.
Yeah.
Would you, if you had hindsight, would you say, okay, if they would have came in and said, you know what, you cannot do this because of safety concerns, what would have your church done?
Would say it's our religious freedom. We have the free exercise
but they
clause
say
in
you can't. They're going to arrest you for it. What do you do?
They can't, according to the free exercise clause in 1990, until
you're not listening to me. If we changed it such that they can arrest you for this because of safety concerns, right? What would your church done?
Well, first of all, if they can arrest me for it, then there has to have been first some sort of regulation in place saying that I couldn't do that in the first place. Oh my God,
Jim, just dude, work with the hypothetical for God's sake, okay? It's abuse of animals, and it puts you in danger. And they have they're making a law for it, right?
Okay.
And they made a law, and they say, Jim, you can no longer do this in your church. Do you change the doctrine, or do you keep practicing, or you just go to jail? What other options are there?
Well, you would have the more moderates who would stop practicing it and would have no problem amending it, especially the people who were freaked out and didn't want to touch them in the first place. And then you would have the people who are more fanatic and fundamental about it, who would fight it tooth and nail and make a really big deal out of it.
Would there have been a split in the church, you think?
No, actually, I don't. I don't think there would be. Like, for instance, the speaking in tongues things came up in UPC and really threatened to cause a huge divide in it, which it didn't end up doing. What they ended up doing was moderating it and to where it was agreeable to both sides. So I mean, I think that is something that would happen
in a perfect situation.
Maybe they would pass around rubber snakes or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, then I wouldn't see a problem with that, right? But then it kind of goes against the narrative of handling snakes and with faith, right? I mean, it kind of diminishes the whole point of showing that you're capable of handling snakes and not being bit, which we all know is bullshit.
Well, it depends on the kind of snake and how you're handling it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. You get a pit viper, and you tell me how it works out for you, okay?
Oh no,
I'm not going to go into.
We're not talking about corn snakes, right? I'm happy with dealing with gopher corn snakes.
You put a rattlesnake, I'll be happy.
I actually like snakes, but
you put a fucking rattlesnake in my hand, I want to throw it.
So I'm not going to play with rattlesnakes, man.
So what role should politics play in this? How do you think that would develop politically?
Well, I mean, I can see the political justification for it. I mean, again, if there's a harm to the animals, or if there's a safety concerns, when we've had people being bit, right? Let's be realistic. This goes back to what I said about things that are demonstrably false, right? It goes back to the very start of this discussion. Should we allow for people to put out clearly misinformation that is clearly been falsified? Now, if the narrative is such that I can handle snakes and I won't be bit, and we have overwhelming evidence that, guess what? People get bit, right? It just, Jim, you've seen it happen, right?
Doesn't that mean they weren't true Christians?
But at the same time,
exactly. They didn't have enough faith, Sokka, clearly.
But at the same time, 2 years ago, I was posting memes telling people to drink bleach. I mean, so I mean, that's not religious, but can I be arrested for that?
If you were to tell someone straight up, "Hey, go drink bleach," fuck you. No.
It was a very misleading meme. I forgot what it was, but it was like pouring 1 cup of bleach in your coffee makes your teeth whiter or some shit like that.
Well, if it does come,
because now that's some idiot. And I've seen this happen.
Yeah, exactly, some idiot. But should I be arrested because some idiot took my joke literally?
No.
Oh, if it comes to the fact that
people are going to do stupid things no matter what.
If it was a child,
with it, like if you just said, even jokingly said, "Hey, look, drink bleach," and someone did that, and you were clearly joking, there is also the intention. If someone's a dumbass and just drinks bleach for whatever reason, And that's really on them, not really.
Well, not necessarily. Look at I beg to differ. Look at if Jim had been if his sister talking to somebody he was talking to somebody who had mental issues, somebody who was mentally compromised, somebody who had very low IQ or retardation of some sorts, and Jim was just kidding around and saying, hey, you know what, you need to go drink bleach. Yeah, bleach is really good for you. Now they don't have the skill set to rationalize that that's a bad idea, and they do so. He is negligent.
It's about the context, I guess, isn't it? Because
yes, I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, but in the case of a religion, wouldn't that context be there to give them that blame? Because if Jim just posted that on Twitter, like a picture saying, "Oh, adding a cup of bleach," that's different to standing in front of somebody who has the potential to interpret that literally and telling them to drink bleach because it's good for you.
That is my point exactly, is that it is a statement made, saying, put 1 cup of bleach in your coffee will make your teeth whiter. You're not directing that at anybody, but you're putting the information out there for everybody who follows you and sees that to look at. And it is up for them to individually decide whether or not that is good information.
It depends, honestly.
The information comes either, though.
Well, that's when the law comes in and investigates context. If they can prove...
But what law?
Hold on. If it depends on what country you're in. If they can prove, the law can prove in court, and they decide that they want to press charges, that you put that information out there maliciously to misinform people, that you honestly were trying to get people to drink bleach, then yes, that is against the law. But if they can't prove that, and because it was nothing but a joke, then no, it is not against the law.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it's sort of like, if you take that in the context of a religion, it also changes this, because I get it's sort of like an analogy to having a religion tell people that they can handle snakes, whatever. But there's the context of that people want to believe in religions because they've based their lives on it. So in essence, it's sort of like, it is like standing in front of a person, like, this is going to sound bad, but it is in essence similar to standing in front of somebody who doesn't know any better and telling them to drink bleach. It's not the same. I wouldn't equate it with just putting a picture of a meme on Twitter or something. I think it's a bit.
But here's the thing: people have been arrested for contributing to people committing suicide, right? People have harassed people and they've committed suicide over it. There are things that can be construed as bullying, that could be construed as taking advantage of a mentally deficient person. So I think that there is some accountability here. If people do take bad advice like this, maybe they should have a little more accountability for their actions.
And exactly, they should, because out there in real life, I've seen situations where there has been what's been called a soy sauce challenge, or a soy sauce detox, in the fact that people on Facebook have posted anonymously that if you drink a full liter of soy sauce within an hour or 2 hours, that you will have a rather violent but also rather efficient colonic detox. And people have been fully paralyzed, like tetraplegic and all, because of it. And it's taken them absolutely years to recover from it.
Exactly.
So and the law that you're looking for, I don't know who it was that said it, but the law you are looking for generally is criminal neglect with intent to harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I am on board with that, man. I think there's definitely something to be said for that.
Well, I mean, for example, the snake handling one is I wanted to come back to this. I wanted to come back to this one earlier, before we move too far past it. But Kentucky is one of the states where you see a lot of this snake handling stuff happening, and it's illegal to handle snakes as part of a religious ceremony there. It is against the law, but the first off, the law is never enforced, and if it was enforced, the maximum you can get for it is I think $100 fine. So which is
not much of a deterrent,
right? But they've done this as so the law is in place, so and has been recognized that it does not infringe on your religious freedoms for them to say that you cannot handle snakes as part of a religious ceremony. But it's still a widely practiced thing in that region because the law just isn't enforced.
Yeah, it's an ineffective law to begin with. But Caleb, what I
was going to say is I think a better comparison than the bleach thing is, remember back I don't know when it was, but when they were people were posting those iPhone life hacks, like putting your iPhone in the microwave charges it and stuff like that. I think that's a better comparison because they're coming from a position of authority, like pretending they're Apple and stuff. And that's where I think the sort of the church comparison is better, because the church is an authority and they are viewed as an authority, and they're viewed as somebody who you should listen to because they know what they're talking about. And those people who like posted online the guides, put your iPhone in the microwave, or your iPhone is waterproof, that sort of thing. That's the sort of comparison that's going on there, because that is the neglect that's going on. It's coming from people who imply they have authority over those other people.
One other problem that I see that could possibly arise from this, like looking at this, as I'm thinking more about it, all I can think of is that, whatever parameters we set, whatever we decide, that the religion should operate in, that will only work in context to modern society. So this is going to have to be something that is fluid, something that is ever changing. So then the acceptance of religious practice would also have to be fluid. So this couldn't be anything that is concrete. So it has to be something that is very much changing.
Well, it has to change with our societal changes. Morality changes over time. Yes,
right. But religion, though, religious doctrine lasts millennia.
Well, we have to catch up with the times, though. We're going into, it'll be 2020 next year, right? We are going into a whole new brave new frontier with technology when discoveries are out there with quantum gravity waves and understanding of technology to the point where we can do things that even 50 years ago was unimaginable. I want to see more focus on that, and I want to see children learning things that are correct. And all my argument has been is, should we allow for children to have indoctrination of things that we know are false? I'm not talking about religion. I want to make this very clear. People have the religious freedoms, but with religious ideas that we know are wrong, period, right? And I'm not, again, talking about like resurrection. People can say, well, we know it's biologically impossible to raise from the dead. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about the core beliefs, things that they posit as science. It is scientifically proven that the earth is 7,000 years old. No, it's bullshit. You're wrong. That kind of stuff. That's my argument. And I think that it doesn't violate the kids' freedom. I don't think it violates the parents' religious freedom to prevent people from putting out misinformation in a private school. That's the argument I'm putting forth. I don't know how valid an argument is. Like I said, that's why I wanted to have this hangout, to kind of hear both sides on it, because it's not an easy topic, to go in and change parental rights. But I think we, as we learn more and we understand that a lot of these religious practices are bullshit, we have to do something. Too many deaths are occurring because of this stuff. Too much harm is happening. When I read Katie Polson's, with her blog on Pathos, Without the Crystal Ball, I'm just outraged. I'm just fucking outraged. I love her shit. I'm not mad at her for writing it. She needs to expose this stuff, so don't really think that. But it's visceral, right? And when I read stuff that's happening with the Catholic Church, it bothers me, right? I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? How does anybody think that this shit is legit? This is a criminal organization that's getting carte blanche freedom because of the name of a religion, because they've been around for so long. That's bullshit. And again, I know I'm sounding like an anti-theist, and I really don't want to, right? I'm not trying to promote anti-theism or atheism or any agenda. I'm not into that shit or into any of that crap. All I want to do is promote what's right. But I'm having a very hard time justifying, from an ethical standpoint, that how we allow these things to continue without the more pushback. Because I'm not saying enough, to be honest with you.
So, and to answer that question simply, the quick and simple and most effective answer is no. They should not be exposed to that unless, of course, they find their way to that. They should not be exposed to that as a presupposition, as a preface, and as an absolute authority. Yeah. Straight up, no.
And I guess I would have liked to have had Saitan Brunicate in this particular hangout. He would have been a counterpoint, but he is on the road, so he'll come in next week probably. I want to get Sai and SJ and a few other people into these discussions more often. I know Sai's been asking to, and he wants to, because he's a good counterpoint, because we don't agree on anything.
Well, one of the things that bothers me about religion in the United States is that in direct in direct opposition to the Constitution, parents are still allowed and even encouraged to indoctrinate their kids. And like you said, unless somebody comes to it on their own free will, it shouldn't be done. So, I mean, shouldn't there be some protections in place, just like there are for children in abuse situations and everything else? Shouldn't there be some sort of psychological abuse system set in place that prevents the indoctrination? And if so, I mean, what would that look like? Just because indoctrination can be so subtle.
Well, again, I can't disallow the parents teaching the belief of God. I have no say in that. I have no dog in that fight. That's your guys' shtick, right? I mean, you're much more anti-theist in that regard. Res $5. Religion should be treated for what it is, a cult. Well, by the broadest interpretation of religion, it means formal venerable worship in some regards, right? You won't see it listed that way, but religion is generally formal venerable worship, which is a cult. So they do mean synonymous terms in the very large way of looking at that word religion. But I don't want to say that parents shouldn't allow indoctrination of religion. What I'm more concerned of is indoctrination, again, of things that we know that are not true in regards to the religion. We know you can't handle snakes and be safe. That's bullshit. So that there's something that needs to be done, which is not that big of a deal, but it happens. I mean, it's not.
But we also know the Earth isn't 6,000 years old,
right?
See, I think we can handle that with existing laws, kind of like I said, just with a slight alteration. Right now, we require kids, of a certain age, have to go to school. They just do.
Yes.
If we don't allow a school which is teaching misinformation to qualify as education in that regard.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's not education in that regard.
Exactly.
You mean like homeschool?
And so they hang
on, Oscar. I thought they had to give a certain, at least, level of proper academic education, even in homeschool.
Yes,
or
and
private school.
Yes, and homeschool. It depends on the state. It really depends on the state. But what I'm saying is, if we actually created a standard where, this is the educational standard, period, end of story. And if the school does not meet that educational standard, then it does not qualify as you are sending your kid to school. Now you can send that kid to the school separately on like an after school program where they get indoctrinated into, dinosaurs and man walk together, what the hell ever. That's up to you. But I think that would be a great first step at fighting at least the most egregious indoctrinations like, young Earth creationism.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. And by the way, it looks like he's turning out the cams. Saka, you got to think, and then I got to wrap this up. I want to keep this under 2 hours.
Okay, just real.
Sure, real
quick, just to address the homeschooling thing, is that there are many states who have what they call a no-notice policy, like Texas, Oklahoma, Idaho, Missouri, Indiana, Michigan, a whole bunch of states that do not require any contact with federal officials or any state or anybody. That they don't have to report curriculum, what they're doing, grades, or anything.
Yeah.
Here in Missouri,
go ahead. Let's talk about real quick then, Reverend.
So I think
he raised his hand, unlike the rest of you. The people on the outside can't see, but in Zoom, people can raise their hand, a little icon that comes up. So,
yeah, how do you do that?
So
don't tell them.
There's a distinction that needs to be made within the context of this conversation, and that is that the responsibility for this lies on all of us to call out bad practices, and understand that there's a difference between the snake handling is a good example. The Jehovah's Witness blood transfusions is a great example. Is that there is nothing that limits someone's beliefs. Like the government can't limit what you believe. What you choose to believe is absolute. That's fine. That's where the religious freedom comes in. But in the practice is where the government can regulate this. So the government can come along and say, listen, you have absolutely every right in the world to believe that you can handle snakes. But too fucking bad, you're not doing it. Okay? That's not an infringement of your religious freedom. The religious freedom is only about what you can believe. Okay?
No, I disagree. Look, you're allowed to believe anything you fucking want. I mean, there's no such thing as a thought police, right? The religious freedom is how you act upon those beliefs. That's what
the religious freedom extends only as far as what someone can actually, someone can believe. The practices of that religion are things that don't need to fall under religious freedom. So it's the same thing with like the blood transfusions, and a lot of this is like just confusion from people and how they interpret this stuff. Is that a Jehovah's Witness has every right in the world to believe that blood transfusions are bad for their children, but a doctor doesn't have to believe that. And a doctor, in cases such as an emergency, will give the child a blood transfusion and not be held responsible at all, or be thought to have violated that person's religious freedom. In Canada is a prime example, is that we have Jehovah's Witnesses up here as well. And there was a girl that was undergoing, I think it was some type of chemotherapy for some type of cancer. I can't remember what it was. But she needed a blood transfusion. And the doctors gave her one, even against her own wishes. She was 14. And she tried to sue the government for that they infringed her religious freedom. They said, no, we didn't. Because, and the same basic thing was like, nobody stopped you from having your beliefs. No one stopped you and told you that you couldn't believe that blood transfusions are wrong. That's fine. But unfortunately, as a minor, we have a certain responsibility to protect you. And this happened, and too bad.
As a minor, yes, but if the parent explicitly said no, then that's where it would come in, because freedom of religious freedom does not just cover your freedom of thought or your religious conscience. It's also the freedom to practice said religion. And not just practice it, but to if you hold a conviction, a really firm belief in this, and you can prove that you believe in this wholeheartedly, then many of the cases it's justified as a religious belief.
Not if it is a violation of the law.
Well, of course not.
Right.
Objectively,
and reckless endangerment of a minor because of religious belief is not something that you can't
refusing a blood transfusion is not against the law.
Pardon me?
Refusing a blood transfusion.
Also,
right. Refusing a blood transfusion is not against the law. But if a doctor was to give you a blood transfusion in a case of an emergency, they would not be held in a position that they have violated your religious freedoms. They would not be held liable.
Sure. Yeah, and that's fine. But if you have the parent sitting right there, and they explicitly say that they do not want a blood transfusion, and that blood transfusion is not done, and the child dies, then that parent is not held responsible in most cases.
Well, the parent should be held responsible in that case, I'd say.
In cases, they have been held responsible, but we're talking like if and when they're punished, it's a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, but I guess that's the sort of thing that needs to be changed, and that's what I think Steve's sort of asking, is it?
Yeah.
2 hours later, we're at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, 2 hours later, we're going to go for part 2 because I got to end this. I got to go. Yeah. I have another obligation. But, like I said, I'm going to be having more of these chats more often, and I like the fact that Zoom, you can call in. Come in. I can control who comes and goes. It's not like Hangout where people can snipe it or bomb it, because you have a lot more control over it. So I know a lot of people have their hands up, but I got to go, guys. So I'm going to wrap this up. But I think this is productive. I think these conversations are productive. I want to get more sussing out of positions, not necessarily what maybe you advocate, but maybe, is it a good argument, right? Because, again, I'm not advocating that we actually implement some of these things, but I'm asking, maybe should we? I don't know. Right?
It's important to. I think in order to find a solution, it's important to argue both sides of it to find common ground. It's really important to understand both sides before you make a conclusion.
Oh, obviously, because you can't know. If you can't just know one side of an issue and make laws or make decisions based on one side of an issue. That's it, Caleb. You nailed it.
Yeah, and to that, I'm gonna leave it at that just says it all right there. Unless you got something else to add, can you top that?
To find the reality of the subject at hand, you need to have a look at every single exhaustible option, whether it's for or against.
There you go.